by another episode of the Train the Trainer podcast. Today, I have a conversation with Dr. Raôul Oudejans. He is an associate professor of learning and performance in sports, Department of Human Movement Sciences, the Free University in Amsterdam, and the Faculty of Sports and Nutrition, Amsterdam University of Applied Science. And Raôul has done a lot of research into elite performance, especially performance under pressure, and more important for this conversation, into police performance under pressure. And maybe you want to add something, Raôul?
No, as an introduction, that is totally fine.
This is totally fine. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I think you are busy with this subject 10, 15 years, something like that.
Since about 2007.
2007.
Actually, busy with the police research.
Yeah. And also done a lot of other research with how do you call it, dance and music and orchestra,
performing arts. Yeah,
performing arts.
Yes, sports, of course.
Yeah, you published. I cannot sum up all your research because you did a lot of research, and you also published in Dutch this handbook of sport psychology.
Yeah,
where every subject you can imagine is talked about. A very great book.
Yeah.
Although not for our English speaking guests. And today we are going to talk about performance under pressure in the police, and more specifically about some research you did. And before that, I would like to ask you some yes or no questions, which are of course not that easy, but can you train performance under pressure? Is it a trainable skill?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. For everybody?
I think everybody can improve. So if you do the proper things, then everyone can improve in how they perform or react or respond within certain high stress situations.
Okay, that's great. So then we can talk further.
Yeah, otherwise we could stop.
Otherwise we could stop. And is there extra training time necessary for learning how to perform under pressure? Because as instructors, we know that we have not that much training time. So if you need a lot of hours besides that, it's...
Yeah, the answer is yes and no. Of course, if you could have more training time, that would be good. But the challenge is always to achieve what you wish to achieve within the time that you have. So if you have 4 days of training a year, then the critical question is, what do you do in these 4 days that helps police officers the most in performing within their jobs? So this is when they're already police officers. Of course, you have the police academies where there's a whole program in learning. So it's really thinking about what is needed to learn to perform under pressure, and how much time you have, and then make sure that you fill in the program as best as possible for the goals that you have.
And then a related question, also a yes or no question, do we need specific training for that, or can it be done in the training we already do?
Well, you need to do specific things within the training. But so as related to the previous question, like how much time do you have? I think, and this is a bold statement, of course, but not all time that is used for training is used optimally if you look at the goal to be able to perform under pressure. But I think with all the expertise that police trainers have, it's definitely doable to just make sure that the training that is there also fits the goal of becoming better to perform under pressure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do the trainers who are going to do this training, do they need to follow a course in sport or performance psychology?
Well, not necessarily. It also depends on what you want to do exactly. I think it is helpful if you're thinking about training for this purpose, that you know something about it. And of course, that also relates to the recent book chapter that came out, the work by Vanna Hutter, a colleague of mine, into didactical principles that are important. And most of these principles are probably followed by most trainers. But again, looking into the aim to become better, to perform in high risk and high stress situations, you might want to do particular things to address that.
Yes.
And then it's good to know. So the elements in there are: is there self-regulation possibilities in there? It's good to know something about self-regulation, of course. Yeah.
And from your point of view, you've done a lot of research, and under your guidance, there were some PhD dissertations.
Yes.
And not to criticize the field, but in your point of view, did we use all that knowledge in the training? Do you have a view of that?
Well, again, yes and no, because there are definitely initiatives where and trainers and institutions where some of these principles are used and implemented in the training environment. What I'm looking for personally within the different domains that I work is that there is more of a structural implementation of some of these principles. If performing under pressure, sorry. If performing under pressure is an essential element of a performance domain, be it sports or performing arts or policing, then it should also be a structural part of your educational program.
Yeah.
And I think that is still something where there's a lot of work that needs to be done, despite all the good efforts and initiatives that are definitely out there in the field.
So is it reasonable to say that we, and thanks to you and your colleagues, already know a lot about the content, so to speak, about what stress is, how it relates to performance, what some tools are, but that we are not at this point in time maybe capable of embedding it structurally in our organizations? Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I think this is something that I've been discovering over the last few years, and running into that a lot of work has been done with trainers and police officers, and if they're enthusiastic, then that is really nice. But if you want to structurally implement some of these principles within training, then it's actually at a higher level within the organization that the decision should be made, because of course it takes money or effort or resources or whatever. So you have to make sure or train the trainer courses to apply these principles. So we have to look at other levels within the organizations to make sure that they want to embrace and endorse some of these elements.
Yeah.
And if not, then it will never be a structural implementation. And of course, you also need to realize that there's constraints within the organizations for what they can do, that we can only partly oversee, and that are important for them within the organizations. It's always a matter of choosing between what you want to do and the possibilities that you have and the resources that you have.
A little related, but a related thing, you did a program called Training for Excellence. And if I'm correct, you developed nice materials about some stress performance tools, like deliberate practice, external focus of attention, and so on and on. And I think you also try to make it as digestible as possible in fact sheets and so on.
Yes.
But then you made a second move, the second part of the project. Can you tell about that and how it relates to implementing?
Yes. Well, so the project that started somewhere, Training for Excellence project that started somewhere in 2018, was focused on implementing innovative training methods, and innovative also means evidence-based training methods within these performance domains of sports, music, and dance. And similar to what I just said, we worked with dance students, we worked with music students, and teachers, and athletes and trainers and coaches, and offered workshops, and we made the fact sheets on these training methods that you just mentioned that I think can help these performers and their trainers, coaches, teachers to become better in performing under pressure in the high stakes situations that the high stakes domain that they're in. And although the things that we did was received enthusiastically, so this is really nice. So people see it is nice to do, but it's also, well, basically these methods are also methods that you need to learn. These are also skills, mental skills, mental competencies that you not just have like that, but that you need, like imagery, for instance, you need to practice that in order for it to become a powerful tool. So it costs time and resources. So we ran into that, and then this means that you have to look for, again, within organizations and higher up is maybe not the proper word, but to the policymakers within organizations to see whether they can free up resources and make it a structural part of their organization to work not just on physical skills, for instance, but also on these mental skills and how to become a better performer under high stress situations. And it also means that we as researchers need to do other activities, not just work on the work floor or on the basketball court with athletes and coaches, but also with the people around that to actually make the policy and to talk to them and do research. What would it mean? What are the barriers and what are the challenges that organizations have in order to actually want to implement these kinds of things? And the first question is, of course, whether they want to implement these elements as an organization in a structural way.
Yeah. So this also it has to do with the valorization of scientific research, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
There is not a term right now. Doorwerking. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you want, or we want, if we want to have the things that we've developed, we think we see value for that for all these practice domains. This is confirmed by how these practice domains and the people I just mentioned actually receive that. But not surprisingly, that doesn't automatically mean that it is structurally implemented, because that really takes it needs to be part of the policy in trying within these organizations. And that's also some of the efforts that we try to do. And it also means, like implementing means that you have something outside that you put in an organization. And actually what we want to do is, and we're also currently doing as a follow-up of the Training for Excellence projects, is try to work in a living lab format where together with practice, you bring teachers and students and policymakers within the organizations together to see how you can solve the challenges or problems that they have related to, for instance, the professional supervision, including also development of mental competencies and becoming better in performing under pressure.
This reminds me of Christian Itterboll from Norwegian. He is a former sniper team leader, and I think he recently did his PhD. He rounded it up, and he was also a strong advocate of from the start working from inside those teams with instructors, co-creation, and that had the best chance of.
Exactly. Yeah, because you also need to it needs to come from instructors, for instance, because they have loads of expertise in how to train police officers and how to do that. But there might be some additional things that they may use to improve things. But you need to speak the same language, and not the scientific language, but their language. And you need to be able to translate the scientific principles into workable elements for the trainers with the trainees.
And Raoul, if you could do it all over again, going 15 years back, in the lessons you learned along those years, would you do it in another way right now with what you've learned in the domain of performance under pressure research? And
well, not necessarily, because we started out before 2010 with systematically investigated the effects of anxiety of performance in police officers, and we started with the PhD project of Arne Nieuwenhuys, was focused on performing with anxiety, handgun shooting of police officers.
Yeah.
Well, we did find, first question was, are they affected by stress and anxiety? Yes, they were. If they were put in a stressful situation with a suspect who actually fired back with colored soap cartridges, that can hurt. So that gave a lot of stress. Then police officers performed worse. So they shot worse themselves, but also their attention was affected. And when we then provided some brief training methods where they actually trained with additional pressure, then we saw that actually performance maintained okay. And so all processes were restored, so to speak. So that performance was okay after just a few trainings. We continued with that with the thesis of Peter Renden, where we not looked at handgun shooting but arrest and self-defense skills, and we found similar things, that yes, ordinary police officers are affected by stress and anxiety, but if they train in a particular way, then they can actually quite quickly improve their performance under high stress situations. So this is, of course, the first thing that we need to know.
Yeah.
These two theses were done in very close collaboration with the trainers, with police trainers, particularly Gerard Willemsen and Hans Pieren, who so we did the research and developed what we developed together with them. So which also translated in a method for training that they use, where you have different levels of anxiety, but also different levels of threat that you can encounter as a police officer, to actually try to implement this type of training in a systematic way, but systematically thinking about, like, what do you want to learn? If you're just a new rookie or just at the academy, first you need to learn to observe and to see what happens all the time. Well, you can do that in a low stress situation, but at some point you also have to interact with suspects, and you can actually build up in threat, but you can also build up within the training, whether you train that just with no anxiety, just going over the situations, or with additional anxiety, with a suspect who actually attacks you, or with a suspect who shoots with these soap cartridges that hurt. So systematically thinking about what you want to achieve, and if someone is just for the first time coming in, then you don't immediately want to start shooting at him. So you start at lower levels of stress, but at some point you need to increase it. In the end, you want people to be able to perform in those situations.
Yeah. So yeah, you already mentioned those two dissertations, which I see reference to in many recent actual publications. And maybe it's nice to so you say in the Arne Nieuwenhuys dissertation and the Peter Renden dissertation, the police performance was affected by stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
I have some questions about that, and the first I first ask the questions, then we can decide where it would go. But recently there was a scoping review of emotions and stress in simulation training. Very interesting paper where they say that stress and anxiety and stress and emotion are not the same, and Dr. Bilewinski also talked about it. So you can have high arousal but be very enthusiastic, but you can also be very anxious. So that's about what are we talking about?
Yes.
And the second thing, related thing, is when you talk about the effects of stress and anxiety on performance, you use a model you developed called the integrated model of
Anxiety and perceptual motor performance.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can you just explain that model, and maybe after that talk about stress, anxiety? Are we using those terms? Why are we using those terms interchangeably, and so on?
Yes. Well, to start with the model is based on attentional control theory by Isaac and colleagues in 2007. And what they basically said, and their model is evidence-based, is that if we have two functional attentional systems as human beings, animals as well, but as human beings. One is goal-directed attention, where we actually focus attention on with respect to the goals that we have, so on the tasks that we want to perform. And we have a system that's stimulus-driven. It's called stimulus-driven attention, which is actually the system that can draw our attention if something happens, or if there is a sound or a loud noise. If there would be a loud noise here, it would draw our attention. And it's good that we have that, because evolutionary, this is our warning system, of course, that if something happens, if there's imminent threat, it warns you for imminent threat, so that you can decide what to do, or fight or flee or whatever. So it's good that we have that. But in many tasks that we do, even if it's in high stress situations, well, let's take sport first before we go to police. In high stress, if you need to take a penalty in football or a free throw in basketball, then if you're stressed, then you have the tendency to look for the threat in the environment, for instance. So it affects your system. Mm-hmm. And it might affect your attention, that you have attention that you're actually looking for the threat in the environment, but you're taking a free throw, so your attention should be fully goal directed, focused on taking this free throw, looking at the rim, etc., etc. So in many of the tasks that we have, so the stimulus-driven system is a very good system. It can warn us, but in many tasks that we have, we don't want that, or we don't need that, because we need to be goal directed. Yeah. Same for police officers. So if you run into a situation and there's a suspect there with a gun that is about maybe to shoot you, or then first you should scan the situation, see what the situation is. You have your attention there. So the task then is to assess what the situation is. But at some point you have to make the decision to shoot. Then you shouldn't scan anymore, but you should actually look at the suspect, and even where you want to hit the suspect, and aim your gun and fire. But if that process is affected, which is actually what we found in the studies by Arne Nieuwenhuys, if that system is affected, then that actually leads to worse performance. So back to the model, we have these two attentional systems that should be balanced within the tasks that we are executing. But if you're executing a task that needs full goal-directed attention, but anxiety is there, then anxiety can actually disturb the balance between goal-directed and stimulus-driven attention. Yeah. So, which would mean that your perception is affected, but also your interpretation of the situation. If you're anxious, you're actually more inclined to see a situation as threatening. For instance, if someone pulls out something, then if you're anxious, there's a higher inclination of you to see that as a gun first, before you see that it's a cell phone. And at the same time, a little bit back to arousal, there's all kinds of physical things happening to you. So muscle tension, heart rate is going up, etc., etc. So attentional control theory was this theory that anxiety can disturb the balance in attention, but in cognitive tasks. But the few things that I just mentioned, that's why we made this integrated model of anxiety and perceptual motor performance, is that there are some specificities to perceptual motor performance and to perceptual motor tasks. like what I just mentioned. So the attention going all the way, attention being distracted by your own attention could be your irrelevant thoughts about, oh, if I miss or whatever, which is something that can also happen to an exam, of course. But we show that it does also affect the relevant gaze behavior that you need to have in order to shoot someone. So it affects the attentional processes within the perceptual motor domain, but also the physical processes. If your muscle tension is different to what you're used in your task execution, it might just be that your task execution is totally affected by that. And then rather than a hit, you have a miss. And it only needs to be, well, in order to perform well, you need to have optimal attention and optimal execution, etc. But if something is done to the system, as is what anxiety is doing, then there are all these things that together will increase the chances that you really perform worse than what you would normally do.
Yeah. So you already mentioned a lot of things that are affected by the stimulus-driven attention process, like gaze behavior, interpretation, even I think movement itself.
Physical arousal, movements.
I even remember in one of the dissertations, I think from Arne, that they had also different movement behaviors than they are trained in.
Yeah, that's actually that's actually Peter Renden's dissertation. That was on arrest and self-defense skills. One of the studies that we did was with a knife attack, with again low anxiety, high anxiety, which is what we also try to create in our experiments, to see whether anxiety and stress have an effect. If they don't have an effect, then fine, we can all move on and go forward. But if it does have an effect, then you need to do special things in your training to. But we did find, for instance, that if they were attacked by a knife, by a shock knife, so in the anxiety was actually higher. They had a tendency to duck more.
Yeah.
And actually, by doing that, you're putting yourself in a more vulnerable position, because it's easier for the attacker to go down on you rather than you block hard and high. So that's one of the things that we found with the arrest and self-defense skills, that indeed your movements are and that what you do are affected by the stressful situation.
So that's the that's the integrated model of anxiety and performance you lay down for us. And recently you did a large project called Shot Pros, and I saw some publications, and there was also if I remember correctly, not the scientific papers, but more like popular papers, there was also this same model, if I remember.
Yeah.
And
similar model,
similar model. And I think what I learned from it was, so the intervention is the opposite of the stimulus-driven pathway, isn't it? So if our gaze behavior is affected by stimulus-driven processes, and our behavior and our interpretation or decision making, how can we use this knowledge to perform?
Bottom line of everything that we've done in research is, so first we showed that anxiety through this system, as we just described, does affect performance, and we found that. And we found not just hit miss, but also movement, also gaze behavior and attention, fitting with the model. If that is the case, then you need to do something in training to actually become better in that. And the bottom line is that it's not, and whether it's sports, music, or dance, or police, in the end, it's not just about learning your perceptual motor skills. Shooting is a perceptual motor skill. All these skills are perceptual motor skills. But it's not just about learning to execute your skills, period. No, it's learning to execute your skills within the proper circumstances. And if these circumstances in the end, in the street or in the Olympic finals or whatever, are with high stress and all the processes that we just described, then you need to train for that. And there's two lines that you could think of. And one is the immediate response that I often get is then, oh, you should reduce anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But the start of our work is like you'll end up in a situation where you'll have anxiety.
Yeah.
That's the basic assumption in what we do. So, and yes, of course, there are all kinds of techniques to become a little bit more relaxed, which may help as well, but that's not the focus of what we have done.
Mm.
We've investigated and focused on if you need to perform in so-and-so circumstances, left or right, you need to train in these circumstances. And first we did that with the realistic training scenarios that we did in the research with Arne and with Peter Renden. And within Shot Pros, the focus was on doing that or developing training that can actually be done in virtual reality, where you also have the question, how can you create situations in virtual reality that lead to similar responses, both stress-wise, but also behavior-wise, so that it can be used as a training tool. Because, of course, VR is a technological development that has been developing over the last decades. And at first, it was not fit at all for perceptual motor actions or decision-making because of delays and stuff like that. Well, that is behind us because the virtual reality systems that are out there now are really good at that. So now we actually have virtual possibilities to create situations and circumstances to actually bring people in a safe environment within these situations that we want them to train in, that we want them to become better.
Yeah.
And that was the focus of the Shot Pros project, to develop the VR system. And so we within this was a European Union, EU Horizon 2020 project. But within that project, we focused on VR, and we didn't actually train or investigate effective training or yet, but we investigated the circumstances and whether we could create virtual reality environments and practice systems, so to speak, that could help police officers to train for high stress situations.
And the answer was?
Yeah, so the answer is that yes, within the VR environment, you can create situations that gives you the same responses, arousal wise, anxiety wise, in the environments that you create, meaning that you can that it is actually a proper way to bring them in high stress, even though it's in virtual reality. And that gives the basis to start now, and people are already doing that, like to use that actually as a training system, because we know that it leads to the proper responses. That's important to mention, that look like the response that you have in real scenarios.
Yeah,
because that's what you want.
And what kind of, and you also talked about, I'm not sure, maybe I'm making it up, but I want to go to the interventions. So what are the interventions we can teach as instructors? And I know you did you made a lot of interventions like deliberate practice, imagery, goal setting, external focus of attention. Yeah, and recently we worked together in a group with Karin Roelofs with her dust game, and I think primarily what I saw there was that in real time the breathing is very important.
Yeah.
But back to the question, what kind of mental skills did you found?
Yes, well, it's actually a combination of, as I said, of creating training. In the end, you can build it up from low stress to high stress or low threat to high threat. But in the end, if you need to perform in high pressure or high stress, you need to create a training environment where people can train their skills under these circumstances, so that they can actually learn how to shoot and remain their focus of attention. So this is what we did in the first study with Arne thesis with Arne Nieuwenhuys. We created training environments where they did short real-life scenarios where they were also the suspect fired back with these painful cartridges, so that they learned how to properly respond to that. And at first they were anxious and they were stressed and affected by the stress. But after a few trainings, only 3 or 4 trainings of 1 hour, doing this in a group session, they actually improved, because they're like, hey, whatever happens, we're still in this situation, so I might as well, there it comes, refocus and make sure that I do my task well, despite the discomfort that I experience. So this is what we found there. And this is what you can do in an intervention. And yes, there is more that you can build around that, which is what we did in the Training for Excellence project, that you deliberate practice means that you also structurally think about what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve that, and that you also reflect. So it's a self-regulation loop that is included there, where you use goal setting, and that you reflect on whether you achieved your goals, yes or no, and how you can move on or adjust your goals. So it's deliberate thinking about what you want to achieve and how you want to do that. That's one. With respect to performing under pressure, it was, well, we focused on 2 things. One is what if scenarios. So if you know that there will be a stressful situation, either an exam or what, think about what may happen and what can happen, and then think about what you can do about it, either at the moment itself, but even better, what can you do to prepare beforehand during your training? For instance, do a scenario training. So that's one, and the other is, and that's actually what we now call planned disruptions. But planned disruptions are a form to train under pressure, and planned disruptions are slight changes within the training environment that actually increase the demands of the task, increasing the stress or whatever. So disrupt the situation a little bit, so that it is not just the easygoing within comfort zone shooting action that you have to do, but it's a shooting action while actually you're under stress because there is a suspect that may fire back. So on these planned disruption actually mean that you manipulate the constraints in the environment or in the training setting in such a way that you actually learn to execute what you need to do, learn the task within those constraints. And so pressure and stress, it's the result of several constraints that you can implement in order to achieve that.
And you did that very systematically, I remember, using a little bit of the constraint-led.
It's constraints-led approach. Really,
So you can do the planned disruptions on the task, on the context. But what I also remember is that there is a little kind of danger with the planned disruptions if. And I have this experience from my own training also, if you disrupt it in such a way that people feel like played upon, or that they can no longer trust you. So, you know what I mean?
Well, there are several issues with planned disruptions because, of course, planned, as I said, the disruptions are manipulations of constraints in a controlled environment. That is, of course, important. And what you just mentioned could be the effect, because, I've had this discussion earlier with people like, but they should go home with a success experience because you shouldn't want, and I fully agree with that. But at the same time, the first effect of bringing people in a stressful situation is that they find out that they cannot yet do what they thought they could. Their skills are not yet there because they can shoot, but not in a stressful situation. And that, I think that awareness is essential to move forward, and then to say, okay, I need to do more or other things. It's your justification to do planned disruptions, because then you say, hey, if you want to become better at this, we've just shown that it's not there. So how you frame your planned disruption and how you debrief and reflect upon the things that you have been doing, that should create the safe environment that's out there. And of course, you shouldn't, first of all, you shouldn't do planned disruptions just for the fun of it, because you just want to do something, or, oh, nice, we push them out of their comfort zone and then see what happens. No, it's part of the didactical plan that you have. And that's challenging to do that right, to do that in a proper way. But if you build in also, as I said, the reflection, so that the trainee can give back what they experienced, and also maybe say, hey, this doesn't feel right yet, so I want to do it again. There is actually a very good example of this with respect to the terrorist knife attack at Central Station in Amsterdam a few years ago. Before that happened, there was actually an actual real-life training that they developed at the Central Station. They did that during the nights, because then there were no trains, including the special forces and everyone, but the whole team of Central Station police officers were trained with knife attacks up until bomb attacks. And there was the whole situation was trained. And the officer who actually in the end shot the knife attacker at the Central Station, he was part of that training as well. But he was also the one within that context, after first time or second time, I don't know, said like, it doesn't feel right yet. Can we do it again? So he did it again, then it was okay. And as I said, there's all things happening in between, but in the end, he was the one who actually took down that attacker.
So planned disruption it's like we do in emergency medicine simulation. You have to create psychological safety and tell them that maybe we use some disruptors too.
And of course, why would you want to do it in the first place? I always say, I rather have them feel uncomfortable in a training setting that you create to be a safe environment, than that they find out in the streets. And that they find out in the streets that their skills are not yet there. And this is a critical balance, of course, but if you have the opportunity within training setting to put people in these situations in a proper way, doing it the right way, you actually not just learn their skills, but they learn to execute their skills within the proper context and circumstances. And better do that in a training environment than finding out there.
So we move from the stress and performance model, the integrated model of stress and performance, to some interventions and now to planned disruptions as an example. But you also did a lot of research into gaze behavior on the basketball court, if I'm correct. And I think also in police. And the last 2 years, I learned a lot about gaze behavior. For example, Dr. Bill Lewinsky from Science heavily emphasized external focus of attention. I think he also talks about using external focus of attention as an emotion regulation tool, if I'm correctly. Maybe the thinking is like, if you have an external focus of attention, your attention is in a is in a good place and not in your head.
Absolutely.
But there are so many related concepts also in the gaze behavior, like the quiet eye and so on. But can you give a brief overview about gaze behavior in police performance, and what did you found, and what can we learn from this?
Well, so it is related also to the model on stress, because we say anxiety leads to a change in the balance between goal-directed attention and stimulus-driven attention that you don't want. Attention as such is difficult to measure. one of the things that we can technologically measure very well within several tasks nowadays, but 20 years ago that was really a challenge, but nowadays it's quite easy to do, is actually measure visual attention. Visual attention is, well, this is what you do with your gaze behavior. You attend to the things that you want to see. And the terms that I would rather want to use than external, internal, although that it's relevant as well, is whether it's task relevant or task irrelevant. If the task is scanning, as I said, then you need, so to speak, a broad external focus. Because you need to see what's out there. But then if you come to the situation that you need to fire, you need a narrow external focus of attention. But I would rather call that in both cases, in the one, it's task relevant. It's task relevant to scan and look around. And in the other situation, it's task relevant to focus on the target that you want to hit. Yeah. And this is also what I did in the basketball shooting. Found out when and for how long should you look at the rim in order to hit the shot, and then see whether you can actually train that as well. It could be something that you train explicitly, maybe with a device. It's the difficult thing. The difficult part is that it's 99% unconscious processes where you look and what you do. People don't know that. But that's why it's so interesting that you can investigate that. And within the shooting tasks that we investigated within the thesis of Arne Nieuwenhuys, we did show, as I mentioned earlier, that if you put people in distress, they were actually not looking at the targets at all. Their visual attention went all over the place while the person was standing over there. Rather than, okay, I need to shoot him or her, and I need to now focus very narrow on where I want to hit that person. So it fits with the model that with anxiety or in a stressful situation, attention is harmed. So you no longer have optimal attention, meaning that your attention goes to task irrelevant things in the environment rather than the task relevant thing that you should focus on.
And how can we use this for training? So can I recognize that my visual attention is off, or can I, on the other hand, can I learn to keep my eyes on target, so to speak?
Yeah, you can learn that, but it's difficult. Well, one thing is with the training under pressure things that we did in the thesis of Arne Nieuwenhuys, without saying anything about attention, or we just put them in the situation and we trained them, we found that gaze behavior also restored together. And then on top, which is a prerequisite for proper shooting, you need to look at the target in order to hit the target. It doesn't have to be long, but you need to look at the target somewhere just before you pull the trigger. And we saw that, again, when we first put them in the stressful situation, attention went all over the place, performance went down. When they trained a few times, attention restored and performance restored.
But are you saying that if your visual attention is the result of other processes going more well, or
actually performance is the result of attentional processes being still okay after you've trained in those situations? So it's something that implicitly restores, can restore. That doesn't mean that you may not do explicit stuff with visual attention to actually improve that. What was his name? Mark Wilson and his colleagues, they actually investigated gaze behavior, quiet eye. Quiet eye is also the period that you focus on your target just before you shoot at the target, whether it's in penalty shooting or basketball or handgun shooting. And they found that if you give them instructions about look at the rim now and so, and then that also helped in basketball shooting, also in a stressful situation. So it is possible to do that. I don't know of any research within police shooting, for instance, but within basketball and penalty shooting, they investigated that, and they found that if you, and so you can do it implicitly by bringing them in situations, which is what we did, but you can train possibly explicitly by giving them separate instructions. As I said, you should make sure that the explicit instruction actually affects the implicit and unconscious processes that are going on. And again, using the constraints-led approach, you could think about manipulating the environment, or maybe using goggles or light dark or whatever, to make sure when people can and cannot see the environment. And this is a training that a visual attention training that we developed for the basketball shot, where we designed goggles that could be opened and closed, where at first people do not see the rim, basketball players, but just before taking the shot, the goggles open, forcing them to look at that instant at the rim and make the shot. Because research has shown that not everyone does that automatically in the proper way.
And was it transferable, the skill from the basketballers, then when they had the goggles off?
Yeah. So by training with these goggles, they actually improved their shooting.
Yeah. Okay.
So assumedly because their gaze behavior improves, which is something that we wanted to show but have not been able to show yet. But if you shoot better, your gaze behavior should be better as well.
Okay, great. I've one more question, because I have to be cautious about your time also, and that's about the embodied choice framework. And I tried to, for many years, to get a grip on that embodied thing.
Yeah.
And I know it from experience that it is different to watch a video of an officer doing some task, thinking I would do this and would that. But if you are standing in the room yourself, your body has its own tendencies.
Yes. Well, your body is part of your experience, and is part of the skill and experience that you have. Also, and that's the important part, it's also part of your cognitive decisions. So decision making isn't just a thought process where you think like, okay, if this happens, then I do that or that. No, it's fully ingrained in the experience the bodily experiences that you have. So meaning that, and that's also how actual reality and actual actions are in sports as well. It's not just taking a penalty is one thing, but if you're in a football game, everything is going on. There's a continuous course of action with a continuous decision making that you have to take, that is related to where you stand, where you're running, how fast you're running, how fast others are running, which is also in fact already embodied, showing how important the bodies and what they do are in choices, but also within the things that you decide for yourself. Let's take an example of a police officer who opens a door, for instance, or knocks on a door and the door is opened, and there's someone with a knife who attacks him. Then it's not just a cognitive process of thinking, oh, a knife, and now I should shoot him, or what? No, he moves backward immediately, puts his hand on the gun, see what the situation is, yell, drop the gun, yell the instructions that you need. And this is all at the same time. And then depending on what the knife attacker does, if the knife attacker thinks, oh, yeah, sorry, and throws it down, then you shouldn't shoot. And the decision is made not to act any further other than arrest the person. But if the attack continues and the person keeps approaching, you keep going back and you draw the gun and you shoot. But it's that decision. So it's not like, okay, I have thought processes and now I make the decision. No, it's in the action. It's in the course of action that you also make these decisions. While where the decision is also, all these decisions are also ingrained by your own actions and your bodily processes that are going on.
And what for implications does this? It's not for nothing that such a framework pops up, but what is the lesson we learn from this?
Well, the lesson that we learn is that you cannot isolate decision making, as you say, by looking at a video screen. This is relevant information and you can learn something about it, but you definitely don't learn to shoot better. You need to be in the action and take the course of action that you do. So that's why you need to bring people in the situations and not just look at the screen. So this is the classic division between perception and action, while actually perception and action are really intricately related. So and in what I just described as well, it's a continuous seeing the situation, moving back immediately, putting the hand on the gun. It's one flow of seeing, moving, communicating, and taking other decisions. The decision making always sounds so conscious and sequential, but that's not how reacting in a stressful situation works, or in a sport situation or whatever.
And I can imagine this has also implications for the juridical part afterwards. And not that we are both not experts on that part, but it's a different thing to watch a video and have all the time to think. But if you're in there and all the body sensations and the reflexes,
exactly, and the actual time frame that you have. And at the same time, especially if you're under high stress, you act accordingly to what you have learned. So, and again, if that is all done well, then that's no longer conscious. So, which makes it difficult to remember afterwards. That's why people sometimes don't remember even that they have shot. Or whatever. That's why it's so difficult within such an action, especially in such a high pressure cooker, quick thing happening, that you do things, but then what happened? What did I do? Or that is a possibility, making it really difficult to analyze afterwards, unless there is video or whatever, what exactly happened.
So I would love to talk about a lot of topics related to this, because, for example, I see today the constant led approach and ecological dynamics is taking huge steps, but there's also the information-based processing. There are a lot of clashes already there.
Long debates.
Long debates, and how, for example, in ecological dynamics, they don't like the things like memory and the automatization, and well, it becomes very complicated. But for now, did I ask all the relevant questions for you? Or?
Yeah, I think so. We discussed a lot, so I hope it's clear for the listeners. And,
Well, thank you so much, Raoul, and I hope at one time you publish also this book, and then for first responder performance. In English.
English.
And I will make show notes and put links to all the great things you have already published.
Yes.
So thank you again for all the research.
Thank you.
And then we